Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, call the exterminator. SolidWorks data migration gone wrong. If you couldn't count to 6, this wouldn't have happened. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Call the exterminator. This is my favorite story to tell. The other person's name is not really C. Hickens, pinky promise. A few years ago, I was working as a casework supervisor / desktop support tech on a major disaster. We're talking one of the biggest disasters to ever hit this area, and in the top for the country. One town had over 30 inches of rain, and much of the area is at or below sea level, so it sat there for weeks, and people were in emergency shelters for months. I was there at the start but got called away for a different disaster a couple weeks in, ended up closing out 2 smaller operations, and then came back a few months later, about 4 months after the flooding. This happened during my second time there. For some reason, the organization I was there for decided that part way through they'd try their new model of having caseworkers work virtually rather than meeting clients in person. This was intended to save money, as we could have caseworkers work from home rather than flying a few dozen people to the disaster location and putting them in hotels and giving them rental cars for months. But as this was the first rollout, they had everyone working at a central office, so we could iron out the kinks as they came along, and there were a lot of them, every day. Also, because if some irregularities from previous case workers, that meant we wouldn't pass audit, we had to rework every case, so they'd pass muster something like 25,000 cases. I had a fairly solid understanding of how our systems worked and computers in general, and had just left a job as a desktop support tech in a major library, so I became the point person for any tech issues that didn't require needing new hardware or modifying the systems, mainly helping users that had little to no knowledge about some of the programs we were using figure out how to do what they need to do. As it always goes, some of the people deploying caseworkers didn't get the memo about how the site worked and the qualifications needed to come work with us. This mainly led to them sending us people that generally knew how to use computers, but were far from experts at our systems. Not a big issue, they were great at learning how to do everything and stuck around for months, so we weren't having to train new people every few weeks like they were doing when this project started. The exception to this was Carol. Carol was a wonderful old lady. I hadn't worked with her before, but had heard she was a wonderful caseworker and did great with clients. She would work cases thoroughly, get 8 out, and close the case quickly. The only issue was that Carol always did the work on paper and handed it off to her supervisor to be entered into the database. This wasn't normally a problem when she worked at her local office, as there was only a few cases a month, so the supervisor had plenty of time to get everything done, but we were working entirely virtually, with almost no face-to-face contact, and had far too many cases to have another person sit with her and enter everything. I was put in charge of training Carol. I met with her early in the morning, gave her her credential, training manual, and phone, and showed her to her workspace. I had some very urgent work that was going to take about 30 minutes, so I told her to log in and read a few pages of the training manual, and I'd be right back. I get my tasks done and make a cup of coffee and head back to get started with Carol and find her sitting at the workstation with the computer off. Me, were you able to get through those pages in the training binder and sign in? Carol, I read the pages but the computer isn't turned on. My brain immediately just to the week prior. We had some power issues, but everything seemed to be working fine over the past few days. I really hope it's not happening again, as it was going to take us 3 to 4 days to make up the work, and it largely fell on the supervisors and managers who were already working 12 to 16 hours days, 6 days a week. I had been getting about 4 hours of sleep every day for 3 to 4 weeks at this point, so my brain immediately went to the worst before even beginning to find the problem. I jump into troubleshoot mode and press the power button to see what happens, and it boots right up. No problems at all. Carol, how did you do that? Me, I just pressed the power button. Carol, oh, I just thought it'd be on already. I didn't know I needed to do that. Alright, this is going to be a fun training session. Me, okay, go ahead and log in. Carol, how do I do that? Me, just use the mouse and click into the top box and put in your username, and then put your password in the bottom box. Carol, my what name? Is it just Carol Hickens? Me, your username. It's the first line in the paper I gave you. Carol, my what name? Me, just type what's on the top line into the top box, and then put what's on the second line on the second box. Carol, oh okay, how do I do that? Me, use the mouse to CL dash. Carol quickly jumped up and screamed while simultaneously flinging the training binder directly at my genitals. Carol, there's a mouse? Where? I don't see it. Everyone on the floor's attention immediately came to the screaming woman, except the couple of the people nearby that started looking for the mouse. Carol was transferred to a different department a few hours later where she didn't have to use a computer, and I hear she did great work. I worked with her supervisor a couple weeks later, and found out that in her 82 years of life she had never used a computer. Shocking, I know. Who would have guessed? Definitely not as shocking as finding out she was 82 though, she looked like she was in her 60s. The mouse was never found. SolidWorks data migration gone wrong. The setup. Over the past few weeks, I set up 2 new virtual servers, SolidWorks and SQL Server. This setup included configuring SolidWorks PDM Server, Archive Server, SolidWorks Vault on one server and Microsoft SQL Server on another server. Per the documentation, I named all the internal SolidWorks parts and SQL Server databases the same as the old server to make the migration easier. The data migration and cut-over date was set for Friday, May 7th. On the evening of Thursday, May 6th, I ran a robocopy script that copied over all the data on the old archive server to the new archive server. When the script finished running, I verified that the data on the new server matched the data on the old server using Beyond Compare. I also made a backup of the Vault and the Kinesia MasterDB databases because they would need to be restored to the new SQL Server instance on Friday morning. The cut-over. On Friday morning, a PDM engineer and myself reviewed the configuration of the new SolidWorks setup and restored the 2 databases that I backed up the previous night to the new SQL Server. Once the server-side connections were verified, we started upgrading clients. Once client installs were completed, we asked users to open a file or 2 and verify that things were functioning as expected. After confirmation of a functioning setup, we patted each other on the back for a job well done and exclaimed that this was all too easy. The panic. Monday, May 11th, users reported that files in the Vault could not be opened. After some investigation, we realized that all the engineering files contained in the Vault were missing. The default Vault file structure was in place, and all folders had a modified date and time of May 7, 2021, 3:08 a.m. The what and why. After a lot of digging, we discovered that the PDM archive server cleaner service had run Friday morning at 3 a.m. and deleted all the files contained in the Vault. All the files that the engineering team opened on Friday, May 7th were cached versions of projects and files on their workstations. The cleaner service runs by default every night at 3 a.m. on the SolidWorks PDM archive server to delete any file archives of files that have been destroyed from deleted items in the Vault during the day. The archive server service will contact the database to get a list of archives that should be deleted. What the cleaner does is, when it starts, it contacts the SQL server and gets a list of all document IDs of files that should exist on that archive server. It starts scanning all folders under the 0+F archive folders. It verifies the content of the folders that it can match a document ID against. It deletes the folders named with a hexadecimal name and containing an index.xml that does not exist in the list of document IDs. In our case, because I made the structure and naming conventions of the new servers the same as the old servers, the cleaner service contacted an empty database also called Vault on Friday. An empty database is effectively the same as a database with all files deleted, so the cleaner service interpreted it that way and deleted all files we copied to the server. The resolution. To fix this, and since nothing could have changed in the server-side data, we copied the files from the old Vault to the new Vault Monday night, verified that the data was still there Tuesday morning, and matched the old server data with Beyond Compare. Verified as admin in the Vault view on the server that files were in the folders and accessible. Then unblocked user logins to PDM. If you couldn't count to 6, this wouldn't have happened. Okay, this is a story of me being the de facto local tech support for our 3 auto shops in town. As in, I had an auto job at one, but was the only one that could tell a computer from their rectum, so I had to handle anything tech related. One of our shops had some sort of failure, and had to restore from backups. That's not normally a huge deal. The process requires very little tech knowledge due to a decent UI. It was something like files menu-backup menu-restore from backup- is backup drive inserted? Press enter, wait. But that's too complicated for them. Enter me. Then comes the fun parts. So, the backup system in-house was rather simple. You got 6 USB sticks, 1 for each day of the week, closed Sundays. Every night the system backs up what it needs to locally, and periodically, weekly, I hope, but I'm not sure, it backs up offsite with the provider of the POS software. You have to manually re-enter 1 day's worth of invoices, but there's not that many a day, 2 or 3 dozen, and they're all on paper for you already anyway. So, I'm there, I check, and one of the backup sticks is already sticking out of the tower. I ask if that's from last night, they say yes, so I go through the simple steps above. As you may guess, the process errors out. It can't find a backup. Well, I checked the contents of the backup USB myself. Nothing, it can't even read the drive. Either the contents are corrupt or the drive's busted. I checked the paper that prints out every night with various status things, and yep, backup failed. That should have left a warning, but obviously they ignored it. Okay then, we get the drive from the day before that, and I guess we're entering 2 days of invoices manually. I ask where it is, and they dig in a desk for a minute and hand me a bag with 5 shiny USB sticks. Note that the one I was working with is a little banged up and dirty. These are not. I know the answer, but I have to ask. These are blank, aren't they? They've never been used, have they? No. They haven't. They've been using OneDrive this whole time. Oh, and has that backup failed message happened before? I know the answer here too, but yes, it's been happening as long as anyone can remember. You just hit any key in the morning, and the message goes away. Now, a question that I'm not sure of the answer to. Why, oh why, have you not been rotating the 6 USB sticks like you get periodically reminded to do? We have been. Reader, I'll let you figure out what they were doing. All you need to know is that the tower has 2 front and 4 rear USB ports.